Hello and welcome. I have reviews on 10 Nutcracker retellings ranked from my favorite to my least favorites. Prussian author ETA Hoffman wrote The Nutcracker in 1816. It's quite the quirky little tale. It is the story of Marie Stahlbaum, who is given a nutcracker to her on Christmas Eve by godfather Drosselmeyer. After all the guests have left the party, she goes to retrieve the nutcracker and discovers that he is alive, as is her doll, Clara. At this point, there is a battle that ensues between mice and a seven-headed mouse king, and Marie saves the day by throwing her shoe at the mouse king and helps the nutcracker. Over the next few nights, we learn the story of how the nutcracker came to be. The genesis of the story originates with Godfather Drosselmeyer, who is a watchmaker, I think, in a foreign land, and he is working for a royal family, and they fall under a curse that is given by the queen's sister, I think Lady Mouserings, and it turns the king's daughter into this large-headed creature. This daughter, Pirlipat, is potentially able to be saved by the Crackatuck nut. And as long as somebody is able to get that nut, then she will be saved. The problem with the curse is that if the person saving her takes 7 steps backwards, the curse then transfers to him, which is what happens to our poor, hapless nutcracker. Pirlipat then sees him with this big face, and she decides no, she's not going to marry him, even though he has taken the curse off of her, and the nutcracker is now doomed to stay this way interminably. So over these nights, he develops a friendship with Marie. He takes her to all of these beautiful special lands and areas, and they travel together. She ends up waking up another morning, so this is happening over multiple nights. She wakes up and discovers that the nutcracker is actually related to Drosselmeyer, and he asks for her hand in marriage, and 1 year later comes back with this chariot and takes Marie Stahlbaum off to his lands, and they live happily ever after. One of the retellings that I read that very closely aligns with ETA Hoffman's tale is Alexandre Dumas' version of this. This is Alexandre Dumas who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, The Black Tulip, many other examples of classic literature, but he also did retell this story. My take on it is that it really doesn't deviate that much from it. It's also very brief. There is a much stronger focus on sweets and candies and baked goods, and so I think that's part of what has ended up happening in our culture as we talk about all of the different lands that they travel to. And so if you're looking for something that is very similar to this as a retelling, that version is a great option. My favorite more modern retelling is Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kuzniar. This is the story of Marietta Stell, who is a ballet dancer. She is very constrained by the societal norms of her time. Women are expected to not have passions like dancing and to have desires outside of finding a good marriage and raising children. In this book, Marietta had a very close relationship with her brother, which I loved. So Fritz, as a brother, is portrayed in various different ways. In the original book, I think he accidentally breaks the nutcracker. He isn't seen as being malicious. In this story, they have a very loving brother-sister relationship. And the brother also is constrained by what his father specifically is expecting from him. So this is very much a travel to a different place, and that is where the adventure occurs. And the nutcracker's name is Legat, and he is a soldier. He finds Marietta, who is kind of been transported and then left into this snowy wooded forest. In this tale, Drosselmeyer is very evil, and he actually is someone who is a potential marriage partner for Marietta. So rather than being a godfather, he is this eligible bachelor in the area, and obviously has very nefarious plans. Some themes that are in this book is friendship. So when Marietta, even in her own world, she has friendships, and then when she goes to this other world, she develops very close friendships with other women who have also are being held captive. So there are some trigger warnings of themes of there is a abduction, being held captive, and so that is something to keep in mind. The friendships that she develops when she is in the other world are just very dedicated and sweet, and I love that. There is a lot of ballet in here. Marietta is a ballet dancer, and so that theme continues throughout the book. There is very flowery, descriptive language, which I happen to like. I think there are some people, especially with some of the reviews I read, where people think that it's a little bit over the top. But I do love the descriptions of the snowflakes and the snow and the movement and the different villages and castle that Marietta is in. So if you're looking for a Nutcracker retelling, this is a phenomenal option. Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Walwork is a very sweet, innocent retelling. This has a very heavy focus on music rather than ballet. And so we have Clara Soldier, so named after the doll in the original version, who is a master pianist. And through music, she is transported into this other world where you have the dangers of mice who are attacking, as well as having the Nutcracker, who is Prince Nikolai. It actually, with the music theme, there's sort of this concept of Pied Piper. So the tale is that the Pied Piper would play and rats would follow him. And so there's a really great tie there of music with rats, just as there are mice in the original story. And I actually love Heather Dixon's other books. And so I would recommend Enchanted Sonata. I will say sometimes the magic system felt a little bit convenient, and I thought that the main character of Clara Soldier was a little bit weak. And that is something that you will find through a lot of the retellings, is that the Nutcracker is just this very strong soldier type character, whereas Marie, or Clara, is kind of seen as being a little bit more docile. And so it is something to think about as you're choosing retellings. But other than that, Enchanted Sonata was well written and well executed. Highly recommend. The Nutcracker Suite by Shatona Havig is a very interesting take on a Nutcracker retelling. This is set in the 1920s, and so there's this mobster theme that goes throughout the book. And so we have Clarice, who is working in a manufacturing factory, painting different dolls like nutcrackers, and she witnesses a murder. And so there's a murder mystery that goes through this, and someone that she ends up getting connected up with. So there's a couple gangs. She meets Milo Natale, and he kind of represents the Nutcracker, stands for what that represents as like a soldier and a protector. He represents that in this story. So this is, I believe that Shatona Havig is a Christian fiction writer, and so it's very wholesome and clean, and there is a Christian theme running through this of seeking forgiveness from God and a redemption story in this, but it is not the core part of the story. And what I loved so much is that we just really delve into this 1920s gang mobster world, and it's just well written. There's found family. There, like I said, there's a mystery that you're trying to figure out, and we're going through the theme of prohibition and all of the other challenges in the 1920s. There is slang, so she actually has an explanation in the book to kind of help you understand the different language. So she looked up slang from the 20s and incorporated that in there, but she wanted to make sure that you would understand what was being said. So she has almost like a dictionary in there to explain it, but just a really unique take on this story, and I would recommend giving it a try. Hidden Sea, The Tale of the Once and Future Nutcracker by Gregory Maguire is also a very unique take on the Nutcracker tale. So Gregory Maguire wrote Wicked. He's written other books, but I think that's the one that he's most well known for, which is the perception of the childhood and growing up of Elphaba, who is the witch in The Wizard of Oz. And so he did a very similar perspective on this by taking the perspective of Drosselmeyer. As you're starting the story, you don't necessarily really connect what's going on and what is happening. There's a lot of what I would consider fairy tale mashup in there. We have the god Pan, we have different like dryads and wood nymphs, and there's a lot going on in the beginning of the book. And so I definitely was like, this does not feel so much like a Nutcracker story. But then as you get into understanding the background of that and why that was important to get you into Drosselmeyer and his life, I personally feel like anytime I read this or watch the ballet performance again, it will be so much more richer because I now have this backstory on Drosselmeyer, because he is a character in this where you see him as a godfather, you then see him as a watchmaker, I think, an inventor in this royal household, but you don't really get much on how he ended up being this inventor. And this is his origin story. And again, like I said, the beginning, I was like, I don't know about this, but by the end, it is a book that I think more about different parts of it and how it's all connected and how it links to the original story. And so it really has moved up into one of my favorite retellings. So next I read Winterspell by Claire Legrand, who I think has a pretty solid following as an author. This Nutcracker retelling had a very steampunk feel. And so we follow Claire Stahl, who is living in this world that is very dangerous for her. Her mother is missing. Her father is kind of this alcoholic. He's involved in government. The government's very corrupt. And she and her family are in danger from, there are people around her who want to marry her and have this, again, good marriage, as is the theme here. And she's not interested in that. She wants to travel. And also the person who's interested in her is very dangerous. And she does have a godfather who really hasn't told her what he should have. He knows things that he does not share with her in a very timely fashion. And so all of a sudden it becomes apparent that she is going to need to travel to another world through a doors system, which is a little bit like Midnight in Everwood, but there's a doors system and that's how they travel into these other worlds. That's the magic system. And the Nutcracker, who she has been around her whole life but did not realize the humanness of this character, has now come to life because things have really come to a head and danger is imminent. And so she ends up traveling with him, his name is Nicholas, to this other world to try to unlock and solve the issues there that are bleeding into her normal world. Like I said, it's a very steampunk feel, but there are Fae. My take on it is it's a great retelling, but it is very violent. In fact, there are blood vows that are in it. It just is kind of a more violent retelling. But I will say it really had a phenomenal magic system. And if you're looking for that happily ever after, this has that as well, which is probably one of the reasons why I love the Nutcracker and the Nutcracker retelling, is because most of them end well if you can get through all of the strife and turmoil that is in it. So these last ones are a little bit difficult to put in order, but I'm going to try my best to put them in order of my favorites, but also make sure that you understand why they're ranked that way. So Clara Soldier by Brittany Fichter is a Nutcracker retelling that is done with the spin of being within the World War II setting. And I think that's the reason why it ranks where it is. I don't think the writing necessarily blows me away, but I do love the creativity of taking the Nutcracker retelling and turning it into something that works just like the one that was set in the 1920s. This is set in the 1940s. And so we have Clara, who is at home, and her soldier, her fiance, James, has traveled to go and fight. And we are now at the end of the war. Soldiers are starting to return home, but James has not. And so Clara kind of has this fever dream where she goes to where James is, and she's trying to figure out how she's traveled from where she is to where he is. Where even is he? And in Clara Soldier, the Nazis are rats. And so there's that tie-in of the mice, but being turned into more of a historical fiction. This book deals heavily with PTSD. Clara is realizing that if James is able to come home from the war, he is going to be different than when he went because of PTSD and because of everything that he has seen. And so this book uses the framework of the Nutcracker retelling with Drosselmeyer and the mice and everything within the idea that Clara and James both need to face the PTSD that would be occurring for a soldier coming home from war. So I found this to be a haunting tale. I did appreciate that Drosselmeyer was kind and benevolent and seen as somebody who helps Clara through this journey, but very difficult subject matter for sure. Winter Dream by Chantal Goudry is very Russian. And so I definitely loved the atmospheric connection that you have with the root of the story. And there are Russian words being used. There are Russian names that are in it. And it just really delves down into that world, and I loved that part of this. So this is the story of a girl named Clara who gets a nutcracker from her godfather, and she ends up having to travel to another world. She's being pursued by bachelors that are not people that she wants to marry. She doesn't want to necessarily get married. She wants to travel. And so being with a nutcracker gives her this chance to be exposed to traveling. And through it, she's got to figure out the mystery of who the Nutcracker is and to help these different realms that are having issues. So this very much reminded me of the Four Realms Disney movie, which I love, but is not very similar to the original story. So we had Mother Ginger, and there was traveling among these different realms. And as Clara was trying to figure out who the Nutcracker was, I did feel like as the reader, I already knew what was going on. And so I think it would have been better if there was a different kind of mystery that we were trying to solve together instead of that one. Because doing a retelling means your audience already knows the spoiler of who the Nutcracker is, right? And so I did think that that part could have been done a little bit differently. I also think the character, you know, I know I've talked about Clara or Marie as being kind of this weaker character. Well, this Clara wasn't necessarily weak. She was a little petty and jealous, so there was a little bit of jealousy among other girls and friends that she had and that was kind of put towards her, and that just felt really juvenile. Next, I have The Nutcracker Curse. This is by Margot Ryerkirk, and this is actually part of the Cursed Fairy Tale series. There was a lot that I liked about this book, and I really probably could have had it rank higher. This is the story of a girl named Clara whose stepsister, I think, has the ability to turn into a mouse. This is discovered. She is sent and kept imprisoned, and she sends a cursed nutcracker to Clara near her 18th birthday when she has to choose among these princes who she's going to marry. Clara touches the nutcracker, and this puts a curse on her where the nutcracker every day says, you have this many days to break the curse. To break the curse, she's got to find the Krakatuk nut, which is very similar to that, which I appreciated. And so she has to travel to the Four Realms. So again, very similar to the Disney Four Realm movie, and find this nut. And so it's a quest, which I know some people don't necessarily like books where you journey through the whole book, but I really do. I honestly think one of the reasons why this book did not rank higher is because of the unicorn. It just felt too trite. If she had just had a regular horse and had done this, I probably would have tolerated it. But it just was a symbol of kind of the convenience of the magic system. And so the horn on the unicorn was what could get her into different places. So I just, again, would have preferred the mystery and the puzzle to have been fleshed out a little bit more intellectually instead of the unicorn horn being the way that she would get into some of these places. I also was not overly fond of the love story that goes along with this. There is definitely the Nutcracker Soldier protection theme that goes through there, but again, it just felt very convenient, I think. Certainly a YA level and a nice, simple, and I thought the concept of the sister with the curse and the, you know, that whole thing was an intriguing take on it, but it just wasn't my favorite retelling. So one of the reasons why rankings are hard is because you do have to choose one that is in the last place. And for me, that is Nutcracker of Crystal Falls by K.L. Moody. I really wanted to like this book. I read it as an ebook on Scribd, so maybe if I'd had a physical copy or even an audio book, it would have gone better for me. In fact, K.L. Moody had a Kickstarter where she was offering signed, beautiful copies of this book, and I really was tempted by that, but I just, you know, as I'm talking about these other books that are kind of near the bottom of the ranking being convenient, the writing for this just really built in a convenience in the magic system where I could just not get behind it. So we have Clara, who has a learning disability, which again, I do love the diversity, but she has this gift where despite the challenges that she does have, she's able to view things and be able to tell really quickly their measurement, like the perspective of is something really tall or really short. And so this is an important skill for her to have. She is destined, supposed to be marrying Fritz, who is not her brother, but rather this very evil character that is just obnoxious and annoying, and she's just trying to get rid of him. Her parents are not very supportive, and so when she wakes up, Christmas Eve night after the party, and she sees a troll outside, chasing after this mysterious man that she had met earlier in the night. She goes out, takes her shoe, hits the troll right in the right spot. The troll falls, and of course, she has saved the Nutcracker. This is a fae story, which again, I went into this really wanting to like it. It just is, the dialogue felt contrived. We're circling around in the middle of it. Her job, she's got a job to do to help save the land that the Nutcracker's in. We're kind of like this land of misfits. So her job with being able to tell perspective is like what she's supposed to do to help save it. But we just keep circling around the things that she needs to do, and we keep circling around the trolls, and we keep circling around Fritz coming to get her, and we keep circling around how beautifully blue the eyes of the Nutcracker is. And it just feels like as things happen, we then hear the dialogue that address, oh yeah, why did that happen? The writing, I felt like, kept pulling me out of the story instead of immersing me into the story, unfortunately. All right, you guys, tell me, what is your favorite Nutcracker retelling? Have you read the ETA Hoffman? Tell me what your favorite ballet performance or movie is. I would love to hear it. I love the Nutcracker story. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time.